Thank you very much, Brian. Thank you for the invitation to present on the framework that we developed, which really looks to describe the full breadth of values and behaviours that comprise a healthy research culture. So I'm going to spend some time in this introductory presentation just thinking about this term research culture and how it's emerged over the last couple of years as a term that certainly here in the UK, but also we know internationally in Europe and in Australia as well, is being used increasingly to encompass a wide range of features that certainly researchers say that they want to experience in the working environments in which they're conducting research. So I will start by talking about that, and then I will turn to the project that we worked on last year, which was funded by UK Research and Innovation, UKRI, which is the UK's main research funding body. The work that we did through that project to develop this framework. And then I will hand over to Janet, who will lead a discussion on its relevance for improving wellbeing and mental health in particular. So research culture as a term has only really come into existence over the last, say, 5, maximum 10 years. Before this time, we were much more likely to speak about particular issues in relation to working environment, to the ways that research is undertaken, and to how those involved in research are supported. So we've seen a growing number of initiatives over the last 20 to 30 years that have been aimed at tackling known issues in the research environment. So these are, for example, things that relate to EDI, to equality, diversity, inclusion, and to issues that affect things like research integrity and good research processes within institutions in particular. And certainly within Vitae, we're one of many organisations that have been looking to shift the culture within institutions for a very long time. So within Vitae's case, the culture shift that we've been aiming at is to really embed the importance of providing good, adequate support for researchers, particularly in terms of embedding the importance of professional and career development for researchers at all stages of their career. So over the last 20 to 30 years, we've seen a growing number of initiatives that have aimed at tackling a wide range of issues. So professional career development is one of them. So in the UK, we have a concordat to support the career development of researchers. In European contexts, there are a growing number of initiatives that are aimed at research assessment reform, for example. So things like COARA and DORA as well. But within the last 5 to 10 years, there's been an increasing trend to think across all of these initiatives. And that's in part, I think, because many of these individual initiatives have been focused on tackling specific aspects of culture. So there's been that recognition that a lot of the problems that we have identified in the research system and in terms of working environments are systemic issues, and they are related to values and behaviours within organisational contexts. And so in order to tackle those, we need to look beyond individual initiatives, and we need to think more broadly about how we might affect a culture shift within institutions. And from that, thinking about a wide range of different behaviours and values that need more promotion within different institutional contexts. So the term research culture itself is very much a broad term, and it's not one that is always well understood or well defined. One of perhaps the most clearest, perhaps most helpful definitions of research culture is one that's been set out by the Royal Society. And that stresses that research culture is about behaviours and values. And they divide that into two key areas. So they're behaviours and values that influence the career paths of researchers. So what decisions they make, whether they feel like they're supported to progress in their careers, whether they feel like research is even a place for them. And then on the other hand, the behaviours and values that shape how research is conducted and communicated. So that's things like research assessment reform, research integrity, openness, and approaches to impact. So these are two kind of really broad pillars that comprise different approaches to research culture. And we've been doing a lot of work over the last year, firstly through this the UKRI project on research culture initiatives that I'm going to talk about in a minute, but also much more recently in the context of research assessment in the UK, through some proposed changes to the Research Excellence Framework, which is the UK's main mechanism through which it assesses research in UK universities and uses that to work out how much quality-related research funding the government gives out to institutions. And through that, we've been doing a lot of work to understand different approaches to research culture, particularly in universities, both in the UK, but also internationally as well. And we found that those institutions that are thinking about research culture have taken quite different approaches, particularly in terms of the aspects of research culture that they're prioritising. But that very broadly speaking, there is that consensus that there are two core aspects that comprise research culture, and they are the process of undertaking research. And then there are aspects that relate to how all of those involved in research are supported. So last year we were involved in a project which was funded by UKRI, which looked to understand the landscape of research culture initiatives in the UK. This was a collaborative project, so we worked with research consulting firm called Shift Insight and UKRN, the UK Reproducibility Network. And this project was really intended to understand what kinds of activities institutions and different organisations, so it went beyond just universities, to all research performing organisations. So it was really about understanding what kinds of activities were going on in those different contexts to try and improve research culture, whether they be related to research integrity, whether they be related to attempts to better support researchers, or to improve mental health and well-being, or to improve diversity and inclusion, for example, in different contexts. And in this project, we approached it through a range of different methods, including a literature review. We developed a framework to better understand what the different focus was in these different initiatives. We had a survey or an online call for evidence, which was seeking to gather information about what kinds of initiatives and activities were happening in different contexts. And we held 4 community workshops as well, just to better understand the landscape of research culture and to identify some priorities. And one of the main kind of key focuses of these priorities was identifying where there might be a need for future funding in relation to research culture, and how institutions and organisations could better share practices, particularly around where the evidence is in terms of what improves research culture. And through this project, we identified 347 initiatives relating to research culture, and these spanned higher education and also research performing organisations, as well as some wider sector bodies and community organisations as well. So one of the things that we found through this project was that the term research culture is used very loosely in the sector, and that the specific definition or focus in terms of activities really depended on what either a research unit or an organisation's priorities were. So there were differences in emphasis in terms of what the focus was in relation to research culture. So Vitae's main role in this project was to develop a framework to understand all of these different research culture initiatives and to be able to categorise them, to break them down into different areas, and to really understand the breadth of what is encompassed by that term research culture. So to develop a framework, we started out by gathering together as many different frameworks and documents and reports that related to all different aspects of research culture. So we looked at the Science Europe Values Framework. We looked at concordats and agreements, so things like COARA, things like DORA, and then in the UK there's specific sector-wide agreements around and documents that relate to things like support for the career development of researchers, and there's guidance around things like research integrity and things along those lines. We also looked at what universities, how universities are approaching research culture, so how they're defining it, what their priorities were, and where the areas in which they're taking action were or are. So we gathered all of these things together, and then we looked to try and organise them thematically. An important part of this process was testing it, validating and consulting with a wide range of stakeholders. So we did that in part through a series of interviews, but also through a series of community workshops, which brought together stakeholders across a wide range of different roles within universities, and also wider stakeholder and sector organisations as well. And in each of those workshops, we asked participants to explore different aspects of this emerging framework, to think about the language, whether it was applicable in their context, to think about the relevance, and to think about whether the organisation was helpful and useful. And this is the very top level of what emerged. So you'll see through this that we broke research culture down into 4 broad overlapping areas. So how research is managed and undertaken, how people are supported, how research ensures value, and how individuals engage with others. So those are kind of 4 key pillars that we identified as being really core to understanding the full breadth of what is encompassed by research culture. Across each of these areas, we also identified a number of elements, and these are really the behaviours and values that are critical to improving research culture. So there are 13 elements overall that are then described in the full framework, each of them relating to a different aspect of research culture, whether that be how research is managed and undertaken. So there we have things like effective research governance and management, achieving the highest levels of research integrity and actively promoting sustainability. We have how people are supported, so employment and conditions, recognition and assessment, embedding professional and career development, and ensuring inclusive and healthy working environments. We have how research ensures value, so that's taking an open approach to research, communicating research, and realising impact. And we also have how individuals engage with others, so providing effective leadership and management, empowering individuals, and building collegiality. So that's kind of very high level of this framework. And in the top left-hand side of the screen, there is a QR code which will take you to a page on our website that has a copy of the framework and this infographic as well. but I'll talk through each area in the framework in turn. So this is so in the next couple of slides, you'll see that this I'm presenting here kind of the full framework, and so for each element of research culture, we've mapped out the specific values and behaviours that are recognised as being crucial to seeing to creating a positive and healthy and inclusive research culture, with each one having a series of behaviours and values that relate to a different aspect or element of research culture. So you'll see here on the screen, these are the elements of research culture that we identified as relating to how research is managed and undertaken. So at the top, effective research governance and management. So these are things like the standards and structures and policies that ensure good research practice and integrity. And if you drill down further into what exactly practically that means, they're things like having effective mechanisms, effective policies, providing open, competent and effective research leadership, and providing appropriate, safe and accessible workspaces. The other elements are achieving the highest levels of research integrity. So that's undertaking research with integrity, honesty and rigor. We also have actively promoting sustainability. And one of the things that came out very clearly in the workshops that we ran throughout this project was the importance of bringing in all the different meanings of sustainability in relation to research. So that's both kind of the environmental sustainability, so things like the impact of research on the environment, but also thinking about the sustainability of the research system as a whole. And that was something that we grouped together in this framework. We're turning now to how research ensures value. So these are all aspects that relate to things like value and impact, and openness, taking an open approach to research, was regarded as a really core part of that. This was one of the things, interestingly, that this was one aspect of the framework that probably changed the most, between that process of that initial mapping of what sector documents, what reports, and what different agreements and commitments were saying and doing around research culture, and what participants, many of them working within institutions or in working with community organisations, with what they wanted to see come forward. So this was one of those sections that was most influenced, I think, by those community workshops. And much of that, I think, reflects the very fast changing language with which we're speaking about impact, and how that needs to be a core part of kind of every aspect of the research process from the very beginning. So under this, we have taking an open approach to research. So that's ensuring that research is openly accessible, collaborative, and increases research integrity. Things like communicating research, so ensuring that research and knowledge is available and accessible to all, and realising impact. So the translation of research into value for communities, society, culture, and the economy. And again, as before, it drills down into the specific behaviours and values that are crucial to each of those elements of research culture. One of the largest parts of the framework relates to how people are supported. And certainly there are a lot of behaviours and values that were put forward and deemed to be crucial in the framework development, particularly around ensuring that recruitment, employment and progression processes are transparent, they're equitable and competency based, but also that recognition came through really, really strongly in the framework. So there are a lot of behaviours and values that relate to broadening what is recognised and valued as contributing to the research endeavour. At the same time, embedding professional career development is a really core part of this aspect of the framework, and that's really all about integrating professional career development into all career stages. So ensuring that it's valued at all levels of an institution, that development needs are addressed at all career stages, and that there are a wide range of professional and career development opportunities. And then the last element in this section is ensuring inclusive and healthy working environments. So these are all behaviours and values that relate to the creation of environments where individuals are free to be themselves, to feel included, well supported and confident to express their views. And many of the aspects that came into this, and in fact, thinking about kind of inclusion more generally, there was a kind of an ongoing debate throughout the process as to whether equality, diversity and inclusion should be kind of a standalone element within this framework, or whether it should be something that runs across. And it was the latter that we ended up focusing on, because inclusion runs across all of these other different elements, and as well as being kind of a core part in its own right. And you'll see that it's within ensuring inclusive and healthy working environments that there are those aspects like supporting good mental health and well-being, fostering psychological safety. So that's enabling people to speak out without fear of repercussion or bullying or harassment, and also zero tolerance of and taking action against bullying and harassment. And then finally, we have how individuals engage with others, and there are three further elements within that. So that's providing effective leadership and management, and one thing that's really important to stress is that effective leadership at all levels, not just within senior management. Empowering individuals, so ensuring that individuals have ownership and responsibility for their own careers. And then finally, building collegiality, so the creation of healthy, inclusive and supportive communities. So that is a brief introduction to the research culture framework that we developed. And the framework itself was very much intended as a framework that describes the full breadth of what could be encompassed by research culture. It's something that has been designed to be used flexibly by different organisations, by individuals as well, and very much having in mind that some aspects of the framework will resonate more with certain organisations or individuals than others. And it's really intended to be, now that we've finished the project and we've finished that mapping work, it's really intended as a tool to help support discussions around research culture, to ensure that a wide range of aspects of research culture are considered, yeah, really just to facilitate ongoing and new conversations, which is what we would like you to help us with now. So I'm going to hand over to Janet, who will introduce the poll and then the discussion.
Thanks, Yolana. Well, you can see on the slide that the poll's more or less introduced itself. What we'd like to do is to do a quick poll in terms of, if you look at the research culture framework, which aspects of it, which elements do you think most impact on well-being and mental health? And therefore, in terms of, from the ReMO perspective, what is it we should be looking at in terms of potential activities around mental health and well-being in trying to push forward cultural change within institutions. So Yolanda was saying it's all about behaviours. Some behaviours are going to impact really poorly on others, and these may have a bigger impact in some areas than they will in others. So if you can, oh, the QR code's not on there actually. Wonder whether we can. All right, let me just share my screen, and we can give you a.
We can pop it in the chat.
I can do it quite quickly here. And it also lists the 13 elements of the research culture framework that we're asking you to identify. Those that you think will most improve mental health and well-being if we improve the culture around this particular aspect of research culture. So I'll give you a little bit of time to reflect on that and to connect with it. Okay, I think almost all of you have now voted. If you haven't, you can still keep voting because it will just update as we're talking, so don't worry about that. So this is what we have coming through with 83% identifying ensuring a healthy working environment as the very top element, closely followed by building collegiality. We've then got employment conditions, effective leadership and management, and then empowering individuals coming quite high, with more than half of you identifying those first 5 as the priorities we should be focusing on. And at the bottom, we'll just look there. The very bottom, nobody's put any priority on realizing impact, which I think is quite understandable in terms of what's contained within that element of research. Communicating research, and interestingly, the highest levels of research integrity, not many people have identified that as an important area of focus on. So I may come back to that later in the discussion. But let's start with looking at what's coming out in the top 5 and whether or not people have got any comments in terms of whether this was completely expected or unexpected, or is there something that they voted for that they think should be much higher in this list and isn't being given good attention? So I'm not sure I can see everybody. Oh, I should be able to see if any hands are up. Yes, I can.